27%. That's how much of America Gen Z controls right now. We're talking about 88 million people. Born between 1997 and 2012, they're between 13 and 28 years old. And they're not kids anymore. They're entering the workforce. While older generations are still figuring out TikTok, Gen Z is rewriting the rules of business, entertainment, and society itself. Tonight, we're diving into the 5 trends that prove Gen Z isn't just the future, they're the present. Let's start with something that'll make you realize just how different Gen Z really is. The average millennial got their first cell phone at 20 years old. Younger millennials started at 16. Gen Z, they had smartphones by age 12 years old. Think about what that means. While other generations remember a time before the internet, Gen Z doesn't. They're not digital natives. They're digital originals. They didn't adapt to technology. Technology adapted around them. The numbers are staggering. More than 95% own a smartphone. 83% have a laptop. 78% own gaming consoles. But it's not just about owning devices. It's about how they use them. 1/4 of Gen Zers spend 5 hours or more per day on TikTok. 5 hours. That's more time than most people spend with their family. TikTok usage among Gen Z has exploded 911% in just 5 years. Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok aren't just apps to them. They're ecosystems, places where they work, learn, shop, and socialize. Think about that for a moment. Your grandfather went to the office to work, the library to learn, the mall to shop, and the bar to socialize. Gen Z does all of that on their phone. In bed at 2 a.m., they're not just consuming content, they're creating it, sharing it, building entire careers around it. We're talking about a generation that can launch a business, build a following, and generate 6-figure income without ever leaving their bedroom. They don't see online and offline as separate worlds. To them, it's all just life. And it's not stopping there. 60% stream music daily. 37% listen to podcasts weekly. The average Gen Z person streams 3.4 hours of video content every single day. Searches for YouTube TV have maintained steady growth, increasing 177% over 5 years. Because Gen Z isn't just watching YouTube, they're replacing traditional television with it. Want to know something crazy? 44% of Gen Zers stream more than 3 hours of Netflix daily. Only 20% don't have their own Netflix subscription. They make up 22% of Netflix's total website traffic. That's 61.5 million unique visitors every month. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. They're not just passive viewers. They're curators, critics, and creators all at once. They'll watch a show, create TikToks about it, discuss it in Discord servers, and influence whether their friends watch it too. They've turned entertainment consumption into a full contact sport. It's about a fundamental rewiring of how humans connect, communicate, and create. Previous generations adapted to technology. Gen Z was molded by it. But while older generations worry about screen addiction, Gen Z has developed digital literacy skills that put everyone else to shame. They can spot fake news in seconds. They understand algorithms better than the engineers who built them. They navigate privacy settings with the expertise of cybersecurity professionals. They've also created their own digital ethics. They understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy online behavior. They call out toxic content. They build supportive communities. They use technology to amplify marginalized voices and organize social movements. The phone isn't just their device. It's their gateway to infinite knowledge, global connection, and unlimited opportunity. While older generations see dependency, Gen Z sees capability. While others see distraction, they see connection. While critics see addiction, they see evolution. But while this digital dominance might seem like pure progress, it's creating some unexpected consequences. And that brings us to our second trend, one that's both heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time. Here's a statistic that should worry every parent, teacher, and employer in America. Half of Gen Zers feel stressed or anxious most or all of the time. Half. They have the least positive outlook on life of any generation we've ever studied. They're 2 to 3 times more likely than other generations to have thought about or attempted suicide in the past year. The American Psychological Association found that Gen Z adults were the most likely generation to say that their mental health has worsened compared with before the pandemic. They're more likely to feel isolated, more likely to report not getting adequate emotional support. And up to 75% of Gen Zers report being stressed out by the threat of gun violence and mass shootings. Imagine growing up where school shootings are just part of your reality, where active shooter drills are as normal as fire drills. Some experts call it I disorder, mental health problems caused by excessive technology use. Searches for digital well-being have risen 6,300% over the last 5 years. 6,300%. And here's something that hits different for this generation. They're the first to grow up with social media comparison as a daily reality. Instagram perfectionism isn't theory to them, it's trauma. They've watched friends struggle with body dysmorphia caused by filters. They've experienced cyberbullying that follows them home. They've seen how algorithms can trap you in spirals of negative content. But here's where Gen Z surprises everyone. Instead of hiding from these problems, they're facing them head-on. They're more likely than any previous generation to seek treatment from mental health professionals. They're talking openly about therapy, medication, and mental health struggles. They've basically eliminated the stigma that kept previous generations suffering in silence. They're not just going to therapy. They're making therapy cool. Therapy TikToks get millions of views. Mental health awareness posts get more engagement than celebrity gossip. They've turned vulnerability into a superpower. Celebrities, many of them Gen Z or millennials, are speaking publicly about their own mental health battles. Billie Eilish talks about depression. Simone Biles prioritizes mental health over medals. And Gen Z is listening. They're not just acknowledging their problems. They're building solutions. Mental health apps see massive Gen Z adoption. Online therapy platforms are booming. Wellness communities on Discord and Reddit provide 24/7 peer support. Gen Z isn't just using these tools, they're creating them, funding them, and improving them. They're proving something revolutionary. You can be the most connected generation in history and still prioritize disconnecting. You can acknowledge your mental health struggles without letting them define you. They're turning their pain into progress, their struggles into strength, their trauma into transformation. But what sets Gen Z apart isn't just their willingness to seek help. It's their holistic approach to mental wellness. They understand that mental health isn't just about therapy and medication. It's about sleep hygiene, nutrition, exercise, boundaries, and community. They've normalized taking mental health days. They've popularized the concept of self-care beyond face masks and bubble baths. They practice digital detoxes, mindfulness exercises, and stress management techniques that previous generations discovered only after burnout. They're also redefining what strength looks like. Previous generations equated strength with stoicism. Gen Z equates strength with self-awareness. Previous generations valued pushing through. Gen Z values checking in. They're creating a culture where asking for help is seen as smart, not weak. Where setting boundaries is seen as mature, not selfish. Where prioritizing mental health is seen as responsible, not lazy. This generation isn't just dealing with unprecedented mental health challenges. They're pioneering unprecedented mental health solutions. And in doing so, they're probably saving not just themselves, but future generations too. But their skepticism about institutions and authority, that's where things get really interesting. And it's reshaping politics, business, and society in ways that most people don't even realize yet. Gen Z has a complicated relationship with trust, and it's about to change everything about how our society works. Let's start with government. 70% of Gen Zers believe the government should do more to solve problems, but 66% disagree that the government has done its best to protect the country. Nearly 60% say it would be difficult to trust the government post-pandemic. Here's why this matters more than you think. In 2020, millennials and Gen Z made up 37% of voting-eligible Americans. In 2024, that jumped to 44%. All that growth came from Gen Z. They're not just voting, they're voting differently, with different priorities, different expectations, different definitions of what leadership looks like. But the trust crisis goes way beyond politics. Only 39% of Gen Z internet users trust brands to keep their data safe. That's lower than any other generation. 24% don't trust business leaders. 30% don't trust traditional media. 49% don't trust religious leaders. You might think this sounds like a generation that's given up, but you'd be wrong. Gen Z hasn't stopped believing in institutions. They've started demanding better ones. They don't trust brands that just talk about values. They trust brands that live their values. They can spot authentic social responsibility from marketing BS a mile away. They don't trust leaders who promise change. They trust leaders who deliver change. And when those leaders fail, Gen Z moves on. Fast. This isn't cynicism, it's accountability. They're not anti-institution, they're pro-authenticity. They're not giving up on the system. They're demanding a better system. And nowhere is this more obvious than in how they approach diversity and social justice. Because while other generations debate whether representation matters, Gen Z is busy making it happen. Gen Z isn't just talking about diversity. They are diversity. 48% of Gen Zers are from racial or ethnic minorities. In some regions like the West, non-Hispanic whites make up only 40% of the Gen Z population. Nearly 40% of the entire Hispanic population in America belongs to Gen Z. When you grow up in the most diverse generation in American history, diversity isn't a policy position. It's just life. 62% of Gen Zers believe that increasing diversity is good for society, not because they read it in a book, because they live it every day. The UBO poll showed that 88% of Gen Zers feel that blacks don't receive equal treatment. 4 out of 5 support the Black Lives Matter movement. Even among Gen Z Republicans, people who disagree with older Republicans about almost everything, there's widespread agreement that racial inequality is real and needs to be addressed. But here's what's really revolutionary about Gen Z's approach to diversity. They're not waiting for permission. They're not asking older generations to approve their values. They're just living them. In their friend groups, in their content, in their purchasing decisions, in their career choices. When Gen Z supports a brand, it's not just because they like the product. It's because the brand represents their values. When they reject a brand, it's not just about price or quality, it's about authenticity. This generation doesn't see diversity as a checkbox to tick. They see it as the foundation of everything they build. And they're about to bring that foundation into the workplace, where they're not just changing who gets hired, they're changing what work itself means. By the end of 2025, Gen Z will make up 27% of the global workforce. And they're not just looking for jobs, they're looking for something completely different. Nearly 40% put major emphasis on work-life balance when choosing where to work. Not good to have, major emphasis. But let's be clear about what work-life balance means to Gen Z. It's not about working less. It's about working smarter. It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's about having control over their time and energy. Work culture and growth potential are the top 2 reasons Gen Z employees will stay with a company. They want to know, will this job help me become better at what I do? Will I work with people who respect me as a human being? Will I have opportunities to learn and advance? Will my contributions actually matter? They want flexible hours, fully covered health insurance, free meals, gym memberships, flexible spending accounts for healthy activities. Searches for employee well-being have increased 317% over 5 years. Hybrid work searches surged 342% over the same period. But here's the plot twist that surprises everyone. 48% prefer hybrid work environments. Only 30% want to work fully remote. Wait, what? The generation that lives on their phones wants to work in person? Here's the thing. Gen Z isn't running from human connection. They're demanding better human connection. They want face-to-face collaboration that's actually collaborative. They want mentorship that's actually helpful. They want community that's actually inclusive. But they want it on their terms. No pointless meetings that could have been emailed. No FaceTime requirements that prioritize looking busy over being productive. No toxic work cultures disguised as family environments. And if they can't get authentic workplace culture from traditional employers, they'll create it themselves. Nearly half of Gen Z wants to own their own business. 46% of Gen Zers over 18 already have a side hustle. For nearly 1/4 of them, that side hustle isn't fun money. Without it, they couldn't pay their bills. Custom clothing design, Etsy art shops, Fiverr freelancing, content creation, digital marketing, online tutoring. Searches for Fiverr have grown 138% in 5 years because Gen Z figured out something that took previous generations decades to learn. Why work for someone else's dream when you can build your own? This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about creating work that aligns with their values, work that gives them control over their time, their income, and their future, work that doesn't require them to pretend to be someone else for 40 hours a week. But the most fascinating part, they're doing all of this while prioritizing their mental health and well-being in ways that would have seemed impossible to previous generations. Self-care isn't selfish to Gen Z. They're making healthier food choices, using more skin products, drinking less alcohol, because they understand something that took older generations decades to learn. You can't change the world if you're burning out. You can't build the future if you're not taking care of yourself. So what does all this mean? Simple. Gen Z isn't waiting for their turn to lead. They're leading right now. They're not just adapting to the world they inherited. They're building the world they want to live in. And the rest of us? We can either adapt to their vision or get left behind. Because Gen Z isn't asking for permission anymore. They're just getting started. If this video helped you understand the generation that's reshaping everything around us, hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Are you part of Gen Z or do you work with them? What trends have you noticed that we didn't cover? Don't forget to hit that bell icon for notifications